Imagine walking into a room and, without a word, forcing people to confront the parts of themselves they've spent years avoiding. Not because you tried, not because you said anything profound, but because something about your presence acts like a mirror that has never been cracked, never distorted. A mirror that reflects not just smiles or polite conversation, but the raw, hidden architecture of the human soul. People glance at you, and in that moment, something inside them trembles. You can feel it. The subtle withdrawal, the sudden defensiveness, the way their eyes flicker as if they've seen something in your gaze they weren't ready to meet. A rare kind of silence tends to fall around you. It's not awkwardness, it's exposure. They've been seen. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Hatsu Via. But what happens when your existence alone becomes the irritant? When your aura peels back the fragile layers others have used to conceal their wounds, their fears, their contradictions? It doesn't make sense. Not to them. Not at first. You've done nothing but exist. And yet their masks begin to slip. Their projections begin to stir. In your presence, people either feel strangely safe or terrifyingly naked. There is little middle ground. You are not the cause of their discomfort. You are the condition that reveals it. Most people spend their lives perfecting the art of hiding from others, but mostly from themselves. Your aura, this rare frequency you carry, short-circuits that illusion. It collapses the performance, cuts through the pretense, and unveils the truth behind the facade. And truth, as Jung understood well, is never comfortable. So you walk through the world like an involuntary revealer, part oracle, part exorcist. You didn't ask for this. You never applied for the role. But it has followed you for as long as you can remember. The sense that people show you sides of themselves they never show anyone else. Not out of trust, but out of involuntary collapse. This is not charisma. It is something far more ancient, more unsettling. It is the rare aura that exposes people's true nature. And the question you may have never dared to ask is this: what kind of soul sees truth so clearly that even the lies of others cannot survive its presence? There are people who enter a space and immediately shift its psychological temperature, not through sound or action, but through presence. It is not charm, nor is it charisma. In fact, it often unsettles rather than attracts. These are the individuals who seem to operate on a frequency the average psyche cannot process without distortion. They are the emotional tuning forks of humanity. And what radiates from them is what Jung might describe not as a personality, but as a force of individuation, an aura that is rare, refined, and deeply catalytic. Carl Jung understood that the psyche is not a fixed construct, but a vast, multi-layered terrain. Within each of us exists not just the ego, the mask we wear in daily life, but also the unconscious, where our shadow hides, the repressed, the denied, the forgotten. Most people never confront this shadow. It is too painful, too destabilizing. They live at the surface, projecting their unresolved conflicts onto others, sculpting entire lives around avoidance. But those with a rare aura do not permit avoidance, at least not for long. These individuals carry within them a refined connection to their own inner worlds. They have, often through suffering or solitude, made contact with their own shadow. And by doing so, they become mirrors for everyone else's. They don't force people to change. They reveal what needs to be changed. This aura is not mystical in a New Age sense, but deeply psychological. It is the byproduct of deep self-work, intentional or not. It radiates through body language, silence, gaze, and timing. It is not about what you say, but about what others feel when they are around you. Seen, exposed, unlocked, such individuals possess a high psychic resonance, what Jung might interpret as a soul that has moved beyond persona and is now in direct dialogue with the self. And because of this, the unconscious minds of others react. The ego feels endangered. The mask begins to sweat. You are not just different, you are destabilizing. And in a world built on personas, anything that threatens the illusion of stability is often met with resistance or reverence. You don't just see people, you uncover them. And as we now begin to trace the signs, these telltale symptoms of carrying a rare aura, you may begin to realize it's not just what you are, it's what you do to the reality around you. Sign 1. People feel uncomfortable around you. Without knowing why, it often begins with something small, a shift in posture, a nervous laugh, a sudden drop in eye contact. You've barely spoken, barely moved, and yet you can feel it. The energy in the room has changed. Someone near you has become unsettled, like a chord was struck in their psyche that even they cannot identify. And the strangest part, they don't know why. But you do, or at least part of you does. Carl Jung taught that what is unconscious in us is projected onto the external world. When people encounter something or someone that reflects their unconscious shadow, their immediate response is rarely recognition. It's discomfort, tension, sometimes inexplicable dislike. In you, they feel a disruption to the fragile balance they've constructed between who they are and who they pretend to be. Your presence becomes a kind of quiet psychological interrogation. You ask nothing, yet they begin to squirm. Not because of who you are, but because of what you represent. Clarity, depth, stillness. These are qualities the ego resents because they make noise in the unconscious. People aren't used to being truly seen. Most interactions are built on reciprocal illusions, but you don't play that game. You can't. There's something about you, your gaze, your silence, your essence, that strips away the comfort of masks. Without knowing it, others begin to feel naked in your presence, not in body, but in psyche. The part of them they keep hidden suddenly feels exposed, and they retreat. Or worse, they become defensive. They may criticize you, dismiss you, laugh nervously, or accuse you of being too much or too serious. These are not reflections of your flaws. They are reactions to their own psychological dissonance. You didn't make them uncomfortable. Their illusions simply don't hold up around you. This is the paradox of the rare aura. It creates discomfort, not through aggression, but through authenticity. The truth of your being agitates the lie in theirs, and over time, you begin to notice a pattern, one that is both isolating and strangely empowering. Because when you start to feel like a walking trigger, you realize something deeper is at play. Sign 2. Strangers confess their deepest secrets to you. There are moments when a stranger's voice lowers, their gaze softens, and suddenly they are telling you things they haven't spoken aloud in years, if ever. You've heard it all. Childhood memories, lost loves, fears about dying, affairs, addictions, betrayals, dreams left to rot in the corners of their lives. And almost always, they pause somewhere in the confession and say, "I don't know why I'm telling you this." But you know, you've always known. Carl Jung explored the archetype of the wounded healer, a figure who, through their own suffering and psychological confrontation, becomes a vessel for others' pain. You don't just listen, you absorb, you make space. Not the kind of space where someone is being analyzed, but the rare kind where they feel, perhaps for the first time, completely unjudged. Your aura is not loud. It's gravitational. It pulls truth out of people's mouths before they realize they're speaking it. Something in your presence bypasses defenses. It's as if their unconscious recognizes you, not as a threat, but as an invitation to finally lay something down. You carry an energy of depth, and the psyche always seeks depth when it is drowning. Strangers are drawn to you like sleepwalkers toward a fire, unaware, unfiltered, unguarded. You are the keeper of secrets you never asked to hear. And sometimes, it's overwhelming. Because people don't just talk, they transfer their heaviness. They leave parts of their shadow with you and walk away feeling lighter. Meanwhile, you carry what they were too afraid to hold alone. But this, too, is a sign. You are not simply a person. You are a threshold. And when people cross it, they don't just speak, they shed. Sign 3. You can tell when someone is lying. The words might sound right. The facial expression might even match. But something within you goes still, like a tuning fork held against silence. You feel the fracture in the sentence, the hollow space behind the smile. Most wouldn't notice, but you do. Always. You don't hunt for lies. They come to you. Or rather, they stumble in your presence. The moment someone strays from authenticity, your body feels it before your mind does. A tightening in the chest, a shift in energy, a faint echo of contradiction. Truth rings like a bell. Lies clatter. Jung believed in the psychic function of intuition, the ability to perceive things outside the realm of rationality. This is not superstition. It is subconscious pattern recognition, refined through a deep relationship with your own internal world. Because you've done the work to understand your own shadow, you recognize when someone is avoiding theirs. And lying, true lying, is always an act of internal avoidance. It's not that you can recite facts or timelines better than others. It's that you register incongruence, a voice that says one thing while the eyes say another, a smile paired with shrinking posture, a kind word laced with hidden resentment. You pick up on the static, the distortion, the silence between the syllables. You don't always call it out. Most of the time, you don't need to. You're not interested in punishing the lie. You're interested in understanding the fear beneath it, because lying is rarely malicious. It is protective. It is the ego shielding itself from annihilation. But what others don't realize is that your asura acts as a lie detector not through judgment, but through resonance. When truth is absent, something inside you goes quiet. That's how you know. You don't listen with your ears, you listen with your soul. Sign 4. You've been accused of being too intense. It's not the first time you've heard it. A friend, a lover, even a stranger, offering it with a smile that doesn't quite reach their eyes. You're just a lot. Sometimes it's framed as a joke. Other times, it's a veiled warning. Either way, the message is the same. You carry a depth that unsettles people used to shallow waters. But intensity is not loudness. It is not force. It is presence. It is the gravity of a person who doesn't skim the surface, who doesn't feign interest, who doesn't pretend. You ask real questions. You sit in real silences. You look at people, not past them, not through them, but into them. And in a world addicted to distraction, that is a rare, even threatening gift. Carl Jung described the process of individuation as a descent into the self, a confrontation with one's inner truths, fears, wounds, and wisdom. You have walked parts of that path. You've lived in the quiet chaos of introspection, and it shows. You don't speak from performance. You speak from depth. That's what people mean when they say, too intense. They mean, you remind me of parts of myself I've buried. Intensity, in this sense, is not a flaw. It's an indication of your clarity. You don't entertain small talk for long. You don't tolerate inauthenticity well. You are not content with half-truths or emotional camouflage. This doesn't mean you lack empathy. Quite the opposite. You crave emotional honesty because it's where real connection lives. But many people aren't ready for that, and so they call it intensity. But what they're really feeling is pressure, not from you. From the unlived truths within themselves, suddenly stirred, because the rare aura doesn't radiate force. It radiates invitation into a level of depth most are not yet ready to enter. Sign 5. You witness people act out of character around you. You've seen it more times than you can count. Someone begins acting different. A shift too sharp to miss. They grow louder than usual or quieter. Their usual confidence flickers, replaced by uncertainty. Their words tumble or tighten. Their demeanor grows erratic or overly controlled. And afterward, they often apologize with confusion in their voice. I don't know what got into me, but you do. Carl Jung spoke of the complex, autonomous fragments of the psyche that, when activated, override the ego and drive behavior from the shadows. In your presence, these complexes stir. People begin to act in ways that even they cannot explain. They say things they regret, or reveal truths they didn't mean to expose. You don't cause it, but you trigger it. Your rare aura acts like a psychological amplifier. Whatever is buried starts to surface. And when a persona is built on avoidance, this can be deeply destabilizing. People feel a strange pressure around you, not oppressive, but undeniable. As if something deep inside them is pulling itself forward. Something raw, something real. In Jungian language, this is psychic activation. The self, the deeper core of the psyche, recognizes something in you. A familiarity, a vibration, and it begins to rise, disrupting the carefully rehearsed identities people wear in everyday life. That's why they act out of character. Around you, the mask slips. And it's not always negative. Sometimes they become more alive, more honest, more connected than ever before. Sometimes they access a part of themselves they'd forgotten existed. But regardless of the outcome, they feel the shift, and they rarely forget it. You are not a storm. You are a stillness that draws storms out of others. You don't break them. You reveal what was already breaking. Sign 6. You've been made a scapegoat in groups. There are times when everything suddenly turns against you. A subtle exclusion at first, then a sharp word here, a misunderstanding there. Before long, you become the target, the one blamed, misrepresented, or cast aside. And deep down, a quiet voice asks, "What did I do wrong?" But if you trace the steps, you'll realize you didn't do anything. You simply were. Carl Jung understood that groups have their own collective unconscious, a shared psychic field shaped by repression, fear, and identity. When this field is disturbed, it seeks balance not through introspection, but through projection. The group needs someone to carry what it refuses to face. That someone is often you, because your rare aura is not just seen by individuals, it is felt by collectives. You disrupt unspoken hierarchies, unmask hidden dynamics, and reflect truths the group has mutually agreed to ignore. And for that, they punish you. Not with outright cruelty at first, but with subtle exile. Mockery disguised as humor, silences that stretch too long, narratives twisted in your absence. You become the psychological garbage bin, the one who carries the group's shadow. This is not about personal failing. It's about energetic threat. You are the variable the system cannot control, the energy that will not conform. And so the group does what ancient tribes always did to those who bore the sacred fire. They cast you out. But understand this: scapegoating is a perverse form of acknowledgement. They recognize your power, even if they cannot name it. You represent the force of self-awareness they're not ready to hold. You are not the wound. You are the mirror that made the wound visible. And in a world that would rather pretend everything's fine, that mirror is often the first thing to be broken. Sign 7. You detect emotional shifts. Instantly, a conversation is flowing, and then something shifts. The tone drops by a fraction. The eye contact breaks half a second too soon. A sentence ends, but something deeper lingers unsaid. Others may miss it entirely, but you don't. You feel it. You always do. It's not about reading body language like a textbook. It's something more primal, more visceral. Like your nervous system is wired to the unspoken. Before a smile fades, before a silence falls, before a voice falters, you already know what's coming. You don't guess. You register. Carl Jung believed the unconscious communicates through symbols, dreams, and, crucially, feeling tones. These are the subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in energy that carry more truth than any spoken word. You, whether by temperament or initiation through life's hardships, have become attuned to these tones. Your perception moves beneath the dialogue, into the tension underneath. You don't need to ask if someone is angry, sad, withdrawn, or afraid. You sense it, often before they do, and when you speak to it, gently, intuitively, they blink in surprise. How did you know? They ask. But it's not knowledge. It's resonance. You're not just emotionally intelligent. You're emotionally interwoven. You enter a space, and your aura begins absorbing data. Energetic, psychic, emotional. And while others navigate the scene through logic, you navigate it through frequency. This sensitivity is a gift, but it can also be exhausting. Because you're not just aware of what people say, you're burdened by what they withhold. You're not simply present in conversations, you're submerged in them. This is why your presence can feel heavy to others. You're not playing in their emotional shallows. You're diving into their currents, and most aren't ready to admit what they're really feeling until your presence brings it to the surface. Sign 8. You've felt deeply misunderstood. Your whole life? There's a particular kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being misread, from walking through life wrapped in nuance, only to be flattened into a stereotype, labeled with words that never quite fit. Too sensitive, too serious, too intense, too strange. Words that scrape against your spirit like a dull blade. You've sat in rooms filled with laughter and still felt like a foreigner. You've spoken truth and watched others squint at it, as if the frequency you speak from isn't audible to most ears. And maybe it isn't. Carl Jung understood that the individuated soul, the one who has ventured inward into their shadow and their depths, will often walk a path that others don't recognize, not because it's wrong, but because it's rare. When you live from a place of truth, the world around you, addicted to roles, comfort, illusion, struggles to locate you. They reach for categories, but you don't fit. You are a psychological mirror, yes, but you are also a mystery, and people fear what they cannot define. Being misunderstood is not a failure on your part. It is often the price of authenticity. You weren't born to play a role that others wrote. You weren't designed to speak only in the language of the acceptable. You are something else. Something that unsettles, awakens, reveals. And for many, that's too much. So you learn silence. You grow familiar with solitude, not because you hate people, but because they often cannot meet you where you are. But here's the paradox. In being misunderstood, you are most seen by those who matter. The few who do understand you don't just see the surface. They see the soul. And in that recognition, something ancient stirs. Proof that your rarity was never a defect. It was always your signal. Sometimes people try to control or diminish you. They do it subtly at first. A condescending tone, a comment masked as a joke, advice you never asked for. Then it escalates, shifts in power, questions about your choices, suggestions that you're too much, not enough, should tone it down. All cloaked in concern, in logic, in love. But the truth is simple. They're trying to contain something they can't understand. Carl Jung taught that power, real, psychological power, comes not from dominance, but from integration. Those who have confronted their shadow and made peace with the inner chaos carry a kind of radiance that cannot be faked. It is not loud, but it is unmistakable. And for many, it is threatening. Your rare aura disrupts hierarchy, not by climbing it, but by rendering it irrelevant. You do not need permission to be who you are. You don't beg for belonging. That alone makes some people restless. They try to box you, define you, cut you down to something manageable. Because if they can name you, they don't have to face you. If they can shrink you, they don't have to feel their own smallness. This is not about arrogance. It's about presence. You walk into a space and recalibrate it simply by existing. And that quiet command of self, it calls others' insecurities to the surface. They don't just see you. They see what they are not. So they respond the only way their unconscious knows how. Diminish, redirect, control. But there's a truth deeper than their discomfort. The reason they try to shrink you is because something in them already knows. They cannot contain what was born to awaken. And the more they try, the more your presence becomes undeniable. A quiet fire they can neither extinguish nor ignore. Sign 10. You naturally see the best and worst in people. It happens instantly. Without effort, without analysis, you look at someone and feel the full spectrum of who they are. Their potential, bright and aching like a light just beneath the skin. Their wounds, jagged and hidden in plain sight. You don't choose to see it, you simply do. Most people view others through a filtered lens, projecting hope, bias, or fear. But you see the paradox. The entire architecture of a person unfolds in your presence. The beauty they've buried, the ugliness they deny, the dreams they don't speak of, the shame they can't look at. It's not judgment, it's clarity. Carl Jung described the human psyche as a marriage of opposites, light and shadow, persona and soul. Few ever hold both sides in view. You do. And it's precisely that capacity that makes your presence feel like truth serum. You offer no illusions. When you see someone, you don't just see what they show the world. You see what they are. And this unnerves people because admiration is uncomfortable when it's paired with exposure. They can feel that you recognize their gold, but also their shadow. They're drawn to your perception, yet afraid of what it reflects. Around you, they can feel profoundly seen and terrifyingly vulnerable at once. You may speak their greatness into being, calling forth parts of them long buried, but you also mirror their contradictions. You remind them that they are not just their light, and that is both healing and haunting. This dual vision of potential and peril is not a curse. It is your sight. You don't look at people with hope or fear. You look at them with truth. And truth, as Jung knew, is the most intimate and the most dangerous thing we can offer. Sign 11. Your presence triggers transformation. You didn't plan it. You didn't ask for it. But wherever you go, change follows. People leave your presence altered, sometimes inspired, sometimes unraveled, but never untouched. Something shifts. A realization dawns. A truth lands heavy in their chest. Some begin journaling. Others end toxic relationships. A few go silent for weeks, then resurface, changed. You are not a therapist. You're not a guide. You're not trying to fix anyone. And yet, something about your presence invites others to confront their turning points. Carl Jung called this the archetype of the alchemist, the one who stirs the unconscious into movement. Not with force, but by being a vessel for inner transformation. You carry a certain psychic weight, and when others come near it, their illusions start to fracture. Their inner architecture groans, reconfigures, begins to realign. What was repressed emerges. What was ignored becomes unavoidable. This is not always welcome. In fact, it rarely is. People may resist, pull away, or even resent you. After all, most prefer stagnation to upheaval. Transformation sounds noble in theory, but in practice, it feels like death. And in a way, it is. The death of ego, the death of who they thought they were. And you are the trigger, the ignition, the mirror that forces the question, am I who I pretend to be, or something else entirely? Sometimes the changes are slow, a seed planted, a thought that won't let go. Other times, it's immediate, a shift in posture, a decision made, a truth spoken for the first time. You don't have to teach. You don't have to push. You simply are. And in that being, something ancient awakens in others, because your aura holds space, not for comfort, but for truth. Not for safety, but for becoming. And when people meet that energy, their soul stirs in recognition. This is who I could be if I were brave enough to let go of who I'm not. You are not just a presence. You are a threshold, and to cross it is to change. There's a silence that follows you, even in crowded rooms. Not the silence of absence, but of weight, of presence, of having seen too much to laugh too easily, to belong too quickly. You walk through the world as if made of glass and gravity, transparent enough for others to see themselves, heavy enough to make them feel it. You've likely wondered, more than once, why does this path feel so lonely? Why do others fall away, misunderstand, retreat? Why do the people you affect most seem to either idolize or resent you? Carl Jung once wrote that loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. You live with truths most people are not yet ready to speak. You see into shadows most work tirelessly to avoid. And though you never sought this mirror role, it was etched into your soul long before you understood what it meant. You are a rare frequency, tuned not to noise, but to essence. And essence is unsettling. It demands attention. It demands change. And so, like ancient mirrors once believed to carry spirits, your presence both draws and disturbs. It attracts those seeking clarity, but only if they are willing to meet what they've hidden. But this is not a curse. It is a sacred contract. You were not born to be palatable. You were born to be truthful. And truth, in its purest form, doesn't always comfort. Sometimes it cuts. Sometimes it empties a room. But sometimes it awakens a soul. You are not here to entertain. You are not here to be easily understood. You are here to reflect the unseen, speak the unspeakable, hold space for what is buried, and by doing so, awaken those ready to see. So if your presence has fractured illusions, exposed lies, triggered confessions, or left others changed in ways they cannot explain, know this. You are not too much. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are the psychological mirror. And your path is not meant for the many. It is meant for the real.